Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, and thank you for stopping by yet again. I have several things I want to touch on. These are things that I have had questions that have come in regarding it, and I just need to take care of them. I won't have time for all of them this evening, but I'm going to try to get as many of them done as I can. All right, I'm just going to move ahead. It's one of these nights where I've actually had the free time to sit down and do this. It's just been that kind of period in my life. It's very interesting. Anyhow, there are websites, as I'm sure most of you know, that deal with Panama and provide the news on Panama, or at least their version thereof. Some of them have a very, a very commercial agenda. They all have a commercial agenda pretty much, but some of them very much so. And they need you to come back into the site frequently. And they need you to come up with the $49.95 or the $79.95 for the newsletter or so forth, if you're going to make any money off this. And the problem is you can go for weeks, months even in Panama without any really exciting news. So when you get anything that looks sort of exciting, there is a temptation to expand on it and turn it into a major affair. And this has happened at least a couple of times recently. So I'm just going to deal, one is in the last 30, 40 days, and the other one just the last few days. Now, the one that goes back into last month, particularly in January of 2020, has to do with Colón, which is a city at the other end of the Panama Canal, on the Caribbean side, the opposite end from Panama City. Colón is a city that has a long history of being a port city. Has been neglected, and badly so, for a very long period of time. And when governments finally, in more recent years, have turned around and come back and said, we want to do something about this, we're going to do something, and we're going to make things better and all that, the people there have had a tendency to say, yeah, sure, that's what you always say, prove it, and so forth. It's a history. And both sides have complaints about the other, and both have reason to be, to some extent. And they're having to work it out, and it takes time. But it's probably one of the sorest topics amongst people here. However, it still follows the same basic routine that you would expect in protests in Panama, and you normally see when there's a protest. This is a democracy. You got a problem, you protest. And people tend here to get, well, it's everywhere, to get attention for their concerns. So it gets up there so somebody in the government will sit down with them and talk to them and see if they can't come to some sort of agreement. Now, this one in Colón is a really intense one. There's a lot of emotion associated with it. But, I mean, it's not like properties are being burned and there's rioting in the streets and the hospitals are filling up with victims. I mean, come on. No. All right? So, what happens traditionally is that, and this is a low level, which we have a lot of those, once every 5 or 6 months, and the city area, maybe a little more frequently in the interior, people would stop the traffic in the street. They'll go into a major avenue or the Pan American Highway, for example, in the countryside and block it. Stop all the traffic, aggravates everybody. Drivers here are very used to it. That's why they have ways, so they can get their way around these things in the city. But I think people understand this is the price you pay for democracy. And, it isn't a good way for many groups to win friends and supporters, perhaps, but it does its job. It gets the attention. And what typically will happen is the police will come up to people who have just stopped the traffic, having their banners or whatever, and say, what's going on? Explain what you're doing. If they haven't in advance already gotten a parade permit, for example, which is done, but they just suddenly do this, then and stop the traffic, they're not really parading, then they ask them what they're up to, and usually has some complaint that they're not getting attention from the government on some issue. It could be anything from relatively minor, but everyone else's viewpoint at least, like major pothole problems, all the way on up to some very substantial problems in their communities, in their area. The police would therefore say, okay, and they notify the government offices involved. Typically somebody comes down to talk to the people there if it's at all touchy. Sometimes it's a lower level person, sometimes that's not going to work and it's a more important issue, so somebody higher level has to come down. It can go on for a while. Eventually, as a rule, they get something straightened out, because One thing will not be tolerated here is that people get hurt or property is destroyed. And the rare occasion anything like that's happened, it's been quite a while since we've had anything remotely significant. And it was a one-off sort of affair, happened, and then the next day the public came down like a ton of brick on it. I mean, people will not tolerate it. So you can burn your little fire if you want. You can wave your banner, and you can shout all your protests, but don't think you can go off and hurt people. And that's just unacceptable. And likewise, it's unacceptable for the police to go in and act like they're army people or something. There is a way in which we deal with things. And this is the way we do it. We have it. You protest. You get the attention. You get the meeting you want with an official that satisfies your needs, at least at that stage. You let people go, and you let the traffic start again, and life moves on. It's just the way we do it. If they feel they have to do that. They don't always have to do that. They haven't. And this one was a more severe one, severe in the sense that there's more people involved. But it's not a big deal. And they're working on it, and this is not a surprise and so forth. It's just part of democracy. If you're looking for something like the rioting that goes on, say, in France, in Paris, for weekend after weekend, for so many weeks, the Gilets jaunes, the yellow vests who were out there protesting everything. We have nothing like that here. If that ever happened here, oh my God, these websites would be delighted. They could live off those for months, but we don't give them anything like that. So they have to take something like this affair in Cologne. And the great part was a photo, a fire. Ooh, that's cool. So that caught their eye. The one more recently is the fact that one of the major rating agencies for bonds and what have you came in and did its annual. It's called Fitch. Fitch came in and did its annual review here in Panama. Now, as I've already talked about, as everybody knows here, is that the last government took on a lot of obligations, did not. People thought were paid. It had not paid some of them. It hadn't mentioned others that were shoved back into later on payments so that they didn't have to be mentioned. Anyhow, it was very, very upsetting. I mean, people were fit to be tied. This is across the board. That administration has been severely, and its political party, very severely penalized for having happened, and there's no question about it. So as a result, though, as I mentioned to you, everybody joined together and as a unit, and they worked, and we took a big bond issue to bring in the money and to pay everybody off, to get rid of all the outstanding payments that hadn't been paid, everything that would bring everybody up to date, where we should have been anyhow, and we weren't. And all right, some of this slippage occurs in any administration, but this was very severe. So we've had this jump in our debt level, which is very small compared to, say, the U.S. or Europe or Japan or places like that. But it's still nonetheless higher than we want. And I think most importantly is that Fitch and the rating agencies in general, they know exactly what's going on. They know what's happening. They know about everything to do with this. They do a thorough review. There's no question about it. So what they did was they left our investment grade excellent status one of the highest. And the next one up is really Chile, and I don't know how if they're going to be able to hold on to it given their recent events. I sincerely hope they do, because they paid their bills. They should. But in any event, we're right near the very top, and certainly in our neighborhood, very much so. That particular level is not been touched. Now, in another set of circumstances where there was a lot of trouble and a lot of real concerns about our government, they could get knocked down a half a step or a full step down, which is serious stuff. There are many different levels at these things, but something like that would have been very significant and would have raised the interest rates we would have to pay when we borrow money and so forth. But they didn't do that. Right? But they took the outlook, it's called, it's just a single word, positive, stable, negative. Ours was stable, they turned it to negative. And as they explained, it's published in the papers. I mean, we read, as they explained, that they were very much aware of this debt burden. This was an additional debt burden, and the government was going to have to take care for it and show that it could handle it responsibly and blah, 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 blah. This is what they have to say, and they should say it. They're absolutely correct. And this administration, which has been asking for, by our standards, at least a certain form of austerity, a little more control and spending and so on, not always a challenging thing, but has really, really worked very hard to get this straightened out. As I say, this is a business country. Don't ever forget that. They understand the importance. They work very hard to get this rating, investment grade rating, and they are not going to lose it without a fight. So, no. And that's understood across political parties here, the importance of it. This is a business country. So they know this. And now it also provides support to the president. Whether you're in agreement with him politically or not is unimportant. It's to the government, to the people of Panama, to tell them that you're cool, we like you, you're still fine, everything's great, just do your job, and if you do, then that goes away. Okay, so if you hear, oh my God, they've lowered the rating for Panama, it's terrible, this could be the beginning of the end. Some of these sites are just amazing in what they'll come up with a fire in the middle of the street, or with a change in the outlook for a bond agency. Oh well, so be it. Just wanted to mention one. These are not illegitimate questions to raise and so forth, and it does not for 1 minute say that either the Fitch's concerns or the people of Cologne are to be trivialized in any way. It's just very ordinary stuff that happens to every single country, and there are a long line of countries in Latin America and in Europe and North America and in Asia that would like very much to be able to get through a year with as little trouble as we get through our years. So, I mean, I don't have much tolerance for this. It's silly. Okay, now, beyond that, here, let me see if I get this up here. It is, we had the statistics out. Just a wrap-up of construction for the last 5 years. Since the 2019, the full statistics are now available. And as you can see here, if I get it, yeah. The first three, I'd have them in green just because they were the good years, so to speak. 2015 through 17, you see very solid, in the neighborhood of $1.2 to $1.4 billion a year. And this is strictly residential construction. It doesn't deal with office construction, because we're talking about the sort of stuff you might be purchasing. And then this terrific drop-off in 2018, which continued in 2019. Now, we may see an improvement in this in 2020. I mean, we'll just have to wait and see what works out. But the first few months might start to give us an idea, but it could be later on in the year before we really saw a major change, if we do. You might be surprised that we did as well through 2017, because actually we were having problems in 2017. At least people could see there was a drop-off. And in fact, I began to get a little concerned about it in 2016. But what you're seeing is the fact that people get their approvals for these developments, and they're halfway through building them, and then things start turning a little bad and they start going downhill. Well, they can't just stop. They've got to complete the development and hope that things will get better and so forth. So what you see is the completion of developments that had been originally prepared several years before, had been finally financed, and then were underway for a couple, 3 years already, and they needed to be completed. So even though sales might have been falling, and were indeed in parts of the country in 2017, construction kept going. I wouldn't even be surprised if some of the increase in 2017 wasn't people just getting it out of the way as quickly as they could. I don't know about that. So just give you an idea, though. I keep you up to date on how the construction business has suffered through this. And it's a great setup, though, because now not only does it mean you have very good prices, but it will come back. And when it does, that will reduce the pressure on this market. Then it'll come back basically because there are more buyers. It's not going to come back until there's more buyers. But prices will begin to rise, and we will begin to see an improvement in the construction business. I think they've overdone it, but this is a very conservative business here. So as long as they're making money, they're happy. That's that. Now, one other item. What was this? Yes. Oh, yeah, rather important one. Okay. I've raised the question of rising seas. I've talked about beach erosion. I've talked about flooding is really the big issue here. I raised that in a video on rising seas, and then a little bit follow-up in the next video, and so on. I continue to follow up on it. When I first spoke on the subject, I hadn't actually heard anybody do it by video, but I mean, it was raised occasionally in newspapers, but very occasionally. Then bam, 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 it started getting raised. This issue is now becoming a major issue. It's in the early stages, but it's moving right along. We had a great series with a video and 2 articles based on one area of the country where a point is basically threatened by beach erosion on top of the sale of sand, which shouldn't be happening, and some funny business with that, so that the people, residents on the point that sticks out in the ocean, were worried they were going to wake up some morning living on an island, because this narrow strip of land that's left, that has what's left of the road out to the point, could disappear, and they very disturbed, as they should be. But it didn't talk about many of the problems, the most specific problems that have been faced up north in many other countries. But it raised the issue. And then this is followed by the Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute here, very, very highly respected. A couple of their people wrote in the local papers, and quite a very well written subject on this, and the whole business of rising seas and what it could do and so on, and how important it was in climate change in general. And so there it comes. All right, the next to pop in on this one, and characteristically blunt, frank terms, is the Canal Authority, the Panama Canal Authority, who has no time for messing around in politics, all right? And they have said very little on the topic, but now they're pushing hard because we've had lower rainfall over the last 5 years. We've had increased temperature, about a degree and a half Celsius on the lakes that provide water to the canal. And that means a higher level of evaporation. We are this year hoping that we get through without too much trouble, but this has got to stop. The authority is taking charge, so to speak, and seeing to it, and it will deal with the stuff. And it's going to be saying, this is what we need to do, this is how it needs to be done. They will protect the canal, period. It doesn't make any difference what your political viewpoint is. They know what's happening. They measure it constantly. They don't like what they see. They are working on it, and they're going to continue to do that. And people here will do what they recommend, right? And that's good. Because there's some issues about what about flooding in the city, because the city itself is right down on the water. And my basic response to this is that, yeah, I mean, that's a possibility, but the one thing sure is that this is part and parcel, this is the economy of the country. I mean, the overwhelming majority of the country's business is done in this area, and no one's going to let it close down. So whatever has to be done will be done. And remember that certainly not the Netherlands is number one, but after the Netherlands, we're one of the most experienced nations in the world in dealing with large amounts of water and how to control it, how to move it, and so forth. We're lucky to have them because they're going to be very focused. They're not going to be concerned about a beach community. That's somebody else's problem, somebody else's business. But they will take care of things down in this neck of the woods, and they have the money and they have the income that they can get the things done. Some of these dikes and other sorts of measures taken to reduce flooding potential are extraordinarily expensive, and you don't want to have to think about that. So, but they know how to get it done, and they will get it done. If it needs being done, they'll do it. However, for the rest of the beaches, this is still an open question. And it also raises this whole subject, and much to its unhappiness, perhaps, the real estate industry, too, is going to have to come to grips with it and think about it, too. What can we do at this early stage when we don't have a significant problem? Yeah, we've had some problems, all right, that people don't like to talk about, but we've had some. But nothing so terribly serious. But let's see what we can do in advance, and let's have a policy, and let's have something to say when and I'm getting the emails now, and it actually had nothing to do with my video, oddly enough. People through the website, I haven't made a big thing out of the website, but anyhow, they have coming in and asking, what about the rising seas? What's going to happen to the coast? You know, there's a narrow strip of sand that runs along on a coast, and it's all about that strip of sand. So what I tell people, if you're going to buy there, by all means, go down at high tide. It's all about high tide. That's what causes the flooding. It's not like Venice in Italy, for instance, is always underwater. It's when the high tide comes in, then everything gets swamped. Of course, the water, there's a tide in the Adriatic Sea. It pulls out. Everything goes down. You have dry canals, effectively, in some areas. But the fact of the matter is that high tide, the people of that whole, the Italians in general, are definitely used to this, to tides and to their impact and their effect. And they're not stupid. And they're really agitated and they're really upset about all of this, in Venice particularly, because obviously it is so seriously threatened. And it's reality for them. It's not a political issue. So here, it's not yet that reality, and hopefully it won't be. And it may not be, because it's not necessarily true that every beach everywhere is going to have problems. But we do have to be aware of it. We have to be settled for it. And you need to know if you're going to buy down there. I often tell people, rent. And let this thing work out. If you must be down in the beach area, we've got mountains, we've got lakes, we've got the city. But if you've got to be on the beach, fine. But just try renting. And there's a lot of rentals down there. And I often put in a plug for the idea of renting owner-occupied units or homes, because then you know someone's there and has been concerned with maintaining it over the last, say, 2-3 years. Whereas some developments have had units and condos or what have you sitting there for quite a while. A whole block of them sometimes that won't have had any activity. And of course they insist maintenance is being kept up and so forth. But we've had an occasional story about water damage and a few other things like that. You have to be careful. This has gone on too long on the coast, and so we've got too many people having financial problems out there. And I tell you, you just have to be careful now. So I'm not going to get involved in anybody's concern. If you want to go to the coast, more power to you. But give the owner-occupied units some serious thought. They may not provide quite the same discount you might be able to get from a developer. I mean, if you're going to buy $2 million worth, you're probably going to go to the developer. But good luck. Check everything out, please, for your own good. All right. Now, this is coming up more. We have the beach here in Panama City. It's a debate topic. It's turning into quite a lively debate. This is going to be held over the next few weeks. It's complicated, and this whole issue is going to come up. And it is coming up in great part because of that, too. So there's going to be more happening. I'll keep you up to date on it. I may be the only person who's doing that, either because they don't want to upset people, because it's not politically correct, or they don't want to upset their the money coming in. What the heck with it. I have an ethical responsibility to let you know about these things. Not from the viewpoint of taking anybody's side, but saying this is a business country, this is a business decision, and if you're going to lay out $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 for something like a home anywhere, you're assuming it's going to be good for the indefinite future, and you aren't going to have flooding as a serious problem. You need to know that that is true, and you cannot instantly assume it in an area with a low coast. And we have some areas that have very low coasts. So that's why I follow it. And I'll be doing some more on that, and I'll be back to you. I'll be also talking to you eventually as it gets through process, legislation which will allow rent to buy, where you can rent a home, but you can also choose to use a portion of that rent and have it eventually committed to a down payment or whatever toward purchase. I want to see what actually comes out. Let's see exactly how it's put together and how it's implemented. But I'm keeping an eye on that. I'm trying to keep an eye on everything here and keep you up to date when I can. Thank you for your patience with me. It's been good talking to you. And yes, I know I always say I'm coming back soon, and then you don't hear from me for 2 weeks. Well, it's just the way things are, and I have to deal with life as it is, just like you do. And I'm doing my best at it. Thanks again for stopping by. I look forward to seeing you again.